This is the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 17. We're looking at the squads of the 2023 Gold Cup. This is the short version for Qatar's players. Here we go. It's June, and we're back to look at Qatar's squad, what happened in the selection with the preliminary squad and the final squad. And so welcome back if you're coming from part one, and welcome anew if you're coming in just for the short version, part two. So for you people, I'll just explain what we did in part one. We basically made a list of candidates based mostly on players' recent participation, but also kind of on their long-term participation a little bit. And we organized them according to position and also organized them according to the likelihood of playing. So you'll see on the list definite, likely, and so on. And then today we have the rosters, so we are going to check how we did and let you know who actually made the team and then who didn't make the team, which is pretty interesting, and most media casts don't really focus on that too much. So here we go. Well, we did note that someone who didn't make the team was the manager who took them all the way to the World Cup, Felix Sanchez. But we did know this in the first part of the podcast or media cast in May, that the new manager was Carlos Queiroz. So new manager Carlos Queiroz, will consider him a, having made the squad, as it were. All right, well, for goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Barsha Mashil, and Barsha Mashil did make the squad. And we had a possible candidate in Saad Al-Sheeb. Now, he was the starting keeper in the World Cup, so you may be wondering, why is he just a possible candidate? That's the kind of information we gave in part one. So we kind of talked about his biographical information, but also gave the recent history. And just to let you know here, the reason is because he hadn't appeared since the 2022 World Cup. So that dropped him down to just being a possible candidate. So if you want to know all of that information, that's what we talked about in part one. And Saad Al-Sheeb is actually not selected to the squad, just to the preliminary squad there. And the other possible candidate, Yusuf Hassan, did make the final squad. We had two possible but unlikely candidates in Mahmoud Abu Nada and Shehab Alethi. Neither of those made the squad. And we had, neither of those. No, Shehab Alethi made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And we had a player who seemed to be off the squad, Yusuf Baliade, and he actually did make the preliminary squad there. And so we have a new player here who made the squad, and it's Salah Zakaria. So Salah Zakaria, I think we made a mistake, because I did have him on the list, and I had him as a possible but unlikely player. And it seems like I just kind of overlooked him when we did the May podcast, but we'll call him new here, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's been with Qatar since 2022, just one cap, and he's 24 years old. And he returned after a 9-month absence into the last of their remaining games. And just that was an unofficial friendly that he played there, the last of their remaining games until the end of May. But he was a consideration for the Gold Cup squad in 2021, but didn't make the final cut. And the same is true in 2022. So Salah Zakaria playing for Al Duhai in Qatar, finally getting his chance. Well, at least on the bench here, we guess he'll be on the bench. Okay, let's move on to defenders. And we had definite candidates in Tarek Salman and Bassam Al-Rawi, and both of those made the final squad, so a couple of veterans there. We had likely candidate Jassim Gabber, and he did make the final squad. We had possible candidate Bualam Kuki. He was a big part of the 2019 Asian Cup and a big player in their Gold Cup, in the World Cup, starting all games there. But he and a few candidates, a few veterans like him, seem to be moving out of the squad. So a bit of a surprise there that he did not make the squad, only the preliminary squad. And then we have Mohamed Imad as a possible but unlikely candidate, and he just made the preliminary squad. All right, moving on to left backs, we have Homam Ahmed as a definite candidate, and he did make the squad, the final squad. And another veteran who wasn't looking as likely to be on the squad after the World Cup. He was a starter in the World Cup, but didn't appear after the World Cup, so we put him as possible. And he didn't even make the preliminary squad. Oh my God, I haven't said his name yet. It's Abdel Karim Hassan, or Abdel Karim Hassan Fadlala. So didn't even make the preliminary squad there. So one of the veterans who are on their way out. However, the other possible candidate, Hazem Ahmed Shihata, did make the final squad. Now we move on to right backs, and we have another veteran who was a starter in the World Cup but didn't play since then. And I'm going to miss him because I like this player a lot. Pedro Miguel, or Roro, as he is sometimes known, only made the preliminary squad. But the other possible candidate we had there, Mosab Kadir, did make the final squad. We had a possible but unlikely candidate with Divab Taha, and Divab Taha did make the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And finally, we have a player in the general defenders section. Either I neglected to introduce him in the part one of the podcast, but actually I suspect that I just didn't introduce him because he was just a possible but unlikely candidate. So maybe I didn't think it was worth it, but I should have, because he ended up making the squad, and his name is Yusuf Ayman. So we'll kind of consider him a new candidate because we hadn't introduced him in part one. And he's just been with the team since 2023, even though he's 24 years old and has played for Al Duhai since 2016. So he started when he was 17 years old, but he got his only first and only appearance in that unofficial friendly that I mentioned earlier in June 2023. Okay, so Yusuf Ayman, a bit of a surprise inclusion there, and we move on to midfielders. We begin here with a surprise too, because oh no, it's not really a surprise. Karim Boutayev, well, another one of those veterans who was a starter in the World Cup. Off the team, it seems he was selected to the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And the other possible candidate, Salam Al-Hajiri, did not even make the preliminary squad. So we go down to our possible but unlikely to find a candidate here. And we have Ahmed Fadel, or Ahmed Fadel Hassaba, who did make the final squad. And here again, too, we have another player who either I didn't introduce, didn't consider it worth introducing, or neglected to. I don't think I neglected to because he's right there on my list. So, but anyway, possible but unlikely candidate, Abdullah Marafi. So we'll consider him new as well. And he is new. He's been with the team since 2021, but he only has 2 caps and he's 21 years old. No, wait, he's 31 years old. So actually quite old. He played for Al Arabi in Qatar since 2011, and he returned after a 20-month absence in June 2023. Maybe that's why he wasn't there, because he hadn't played up till May, and he just played the last of their games. So I'm going to actually put him as a new candidate because he probably wasn't on our list before. If he just came back in June. So there we go. Some surprises here. Abdullah Marafi going to be at the Cup, even though he actually maybe even seemed to be off the squad back in May. Anyway, central midfielders, we have 2 definite candidates, Asim Madibo, and the other definite candidate, Mohamed Wad, also making the final squad. We had likely candidate Ali Asadallah, and he also made the final squad. And then our possible candidate, Mustafa Tarek or Mustafa Tarek Mashal, also making the final squad. So all 4 of the central midfielders we had listed are going to be at the Cup. Let's move on to left midfielders, and we had possible candidate Abdulaziz Hatem, and he only made the preliminary squad, despite being a starter in the World Cup. Yet another of those veteran players. He has more than 100 caps, who hadn't played any games since the World Cup. So that seems a real watershed moment for the team, with a lot of players not selected after the World Cup. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Abdel Rahman Mustafa, not selected even for the preliminary squad. We didn't have any right midfielders, any players coded as right midfielders. So we continue on with left wingers, and there we had a likely candidate in Khalid Munir, and Khalid Munir made the final squad. The possible candidate, Ismail Mohammed, was only selected for the preliminary squad. On the right wing, we had 3 candidates at the possible level, and only the last of them made it. So that was Al Abdul Tamim. And sometimes his name is reversed, it's Tamim Al Abdullah or Al Abdullah Tamim. And the other 2 candidates, Naif Al Hadrami, only made the preliminary squad, and same with Amro Surak, just the preliminary squad there. And possible but unlikely candidate Hashim Ali also made just the preliminary squad. And we had a couple of general midfielders. They aren't coded beyond being a midfielder. And Abdullah Al-Yazidi did not make the preliminary squad, but the other one, Faisal Azadi, did make the preliminary squad. Moving on to attacking midfielders, the biggest surprise for me, but actually, again, one of those veterans who didn't play since the World Cup. I coded him as likely just because I kind of thought it was unimaginable that he wouldn't be there. But it's true, he is not there. Akram Afif not playing, so that takes a little of the sparkle off of Qatar for me. Hassan Al-Haydos also just made the preliminary squad. I felt he was kind of showing his age a little bit in recent play, so I'm less surprised with that. But he too is another one of the veterans who seems to have wrapped it up after the World Cup. He was captain of the team, actually. And we had a player who seemed to be off the squad, Abdullah Al-Arak, and it looks like we were right because he wasn't selected for the preliminary squad. But okay, here we do have a new candidate, and it is Mahdi Salam. And actually, he's not so much a new candidate as a replacement for a player who went home injured. So we'll meet that player soon. But Mahdi Salam was not in our list in part one of the podcast. And that's because he's brand new to the squad. He appeared only in their last two warm-up games prior to this tournament. So he has no caps for Qatar, and he's only 19 years old and plays for Al Sadd in Qatar. So Salam Mahdi, a replacement there for the injured Ala Al-Din, but we'll get back to that shortly. Okay. Moving on, we have the forwards, the actual forwards, and we don't have any secondary strikers, so the forwards. And of course, we have Almoez Ali, or Almoez Ali Abdullah, and he is selected for the final squad. And then we get to the player who I just mentioned as injured. He was a definite candidate, and he was selected, but Ahmed Ala Al-Din replaced. I'll talk a bit more about that in the injury section. We had a likely candidate in Mohamed Muntari, kind of a super sub is Mohamed Muntari, and he did make the final squad, and so did the other likely candidate, Yusuf Abdul Risak. Yusuf Abdul Risak coming to the Gold Cup. Okay, and we had a few players who were added from our list. I don't think I'll go through them because none of them are major players. They were players who seemed to be off the team. About 5 of them seemed to be well off the team and were never really kind of big players. But anyway, a bit of a surprise that they came back. There, I'm actually jumping the gun a bit by moving to the added section, so I'll just go to the summaries. Let's do a couple of summaries of the information. So we begin with notable non-selections, and we have all of those veterans, really the team that was groomed for the 2002 World Cup. The players that did so fabulously in the 2019 Asian Cup, and now under the new manager Carlos Queiroz, they seem to be on their way out. And in fact, most of them are in their 30s. But okay, so the first of them is goalkeeper Saad Al-Sheeb, and then central defender Boualem Kouki, and then right back Pedro Miguel, or Roro, and defensive midfielder Karim Boudayev, and Abdulaziz Hatem. Wow, that's quite a list. And then the most surprising of all, Akram Afif, who actually we had considered as a likely candidate. Most of the others we had as possible because they hadn't shown up since the World Cup. Well, that's true of Akram Afif, but we kind of had higher expectations for him. Another one with Hassan Al-Haydos, and finally, no, that's it, because Ala Al-Din is actually injured. Okay, so surprise inclusions. Well, we had a couple of new players there. Not new because they were on our list, but I hadn't introduced them for one reason or another. But anyway, goalkeeper Salah Zakaria. On our list, he was considered possible but unlikely, but he did make the squad. And we have Yusuf Ayman, also possible but unlikely. Ahmed Fadel, the defensive midfielder. We had him as possible but unlikely. And finally, Abdullah Marafi. All of those players we had labelled as possible but unlikely, but how miserably wrong we were because they made the final squad. Okay, and another new player is Mahdi Salem, and he comes in as a replacement for the injury that we'll talk about right away here. And then I mentioned the 4 or 5 kind of players added to the preliminary squad that kind of came back in from the cold. They hadn't been with the team for a long time, but we decided not to mention them. And then in addition, there were about 10 players who were not even on our radar, so brand new names to us. And I won't go through those names because most of them don't have a cap, or they maybe played one friendly, so they're maybe up and comers for the team, and we'll mention them. And actually one of them was Mahdi Salim, so if they take on any kind of a bigger role, we'll bring them into the picture. But anyway, quite a few new players introduced, I suppose, replacing those veterans who are on their way out. All right, and we end with injuries. We only have one for Qatar, and that is Ahmed Ala Eldin. Ahmed Ala Eldin, selected for the final squad but replaced. He actually was not listed as injured on a couple of websites that I checked, and there's no record of it in his club matches, although his club season seemed to wrap up kind of early in May. But he was removed from the squad very recently, so perhaps in a friendly he got injured, or sometimes in these cases they just say it's an injury and there really is some other reason. But so not coded as injured, but said to be injured, Ahmed Ala Eldin, and replaced by Mahdi Salam. And that's it. That is the team for Qatar.